And we're live. Hi, everyone from across Canada and around the world. It's Lev here with Trotec Canada, and we have Josephine Liu and Justina Fabishevich, and Miguel is actually on the camera with the Rayjet. So welcome, everyone, to this webinar. So for many of you that have been researching lasers, and you're looking at hobby lasers versus the more industrial laser machines, we just kind of wanted to give you a quick rundown of the Rayjet, show you how it works. We'll show you photo engraving and the rotary attachment to the Rayjet, and then at the end we'll kind of have a quick discussion and conversation about the hobby lasers versus the Rayjet versus the more industrial Speedy 100 laser, and kind of go through the brief differences between them. If you have any questions, just leave them in the chat. I'll kind of interrupt Josephine and see if she can answer them. The link to this actual video will be posted live on our YouTube channel afterwards. So if you guys can't find it, just go to our YouTube channel, scroll down to the bottom where we have our training playlist, and you'll find it there. I think with all of that being said, I'll give it away to Josephine to go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Lev. So we're going to start off with looking at the Rayjet and the hardware. So as you can see, it's a cute little, what I like to call like the baby laser that does pretty much just as well as the working area is 18 by 12 inches. There is a rotary attachment, which is also available for the machine. I already installed the rotary attachment by bringing the bed down, turning the machine off, and plugging it in. All right. The machine also comes with a honeycomb table. So this is good for cutting. All right. So the Rayjet is a 30-watt CO2 machine. You can operate this laser with a 110 outlet, so any standard outlet in a North American home. We have our Quattro system plugged in, but you can use any third-party exhaust or filtration system. Okay. There are also two types of lenses available, 1.5-inch and 2-inch lens. The trackpad is on the right. You could adjust the height of the bed by pressing these buttons over here. And there's the option to play or pause your job or stop your job. You have a maximum of 10-inch of height. So if you have, a box that's 10-inch, you could put it into the laser and engrave on top of it. Last thing I want to mention is the whole machine is encased. There's no hardware exposed. There is air draw at the top, and it also has wheels. So it's a very portable machine. We have some clients that, roll these to different shows to demonstrate the laser. So after we discuss the hardware, let's jump onto the software. So Lev, you don't mind sharing my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I already have an artwork prepared. I have an 18-inch by 12-inch artboard. My artboard actually represents my working area in the laser, and this is important for positioning. So for example, if I have a material or product that I want to engrave in a certain position, then I would move the artwork to that position and send it. Jumping on to this artwork over here that I prepared.
Sorry, just a quick comment, Josephine.
Yep.
So yeah, we're using Corel Draw for this design software. With the Rayjet, just like with the Speedy series, you can use any design software. So Illustrator, Corel, any kind of CAD software you can use as well. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly put that in.
Yep. So like Lev mentioned, you can use any vector-based software. For this demonstration, we're using Corel Draw. So right here, I have an artwork prepared with my name that I'm going to engrave onto the glass water bottle. Oh, sorry, glass bottle. So I measured where I want to position it, and I want to make sure I'm rotating it. So once I have my artwork prepared, I have to make sure that it is in the right color value. So RGB black, check, and it's good to go. So like any other printer, what you want to do is go to File, Print. Make sure that your Rayjet engraver is selected and go to Preferences. So when you click Preferences, the Rayjet Mini Manager pops up. So this is the software interface that manages the file that gets sent over to the Rayjet. So over here on our left, we have a carousel that you can toggle to find different material settings. So there's one for glass, one for leather, one for metal. So I'm going to select glass. Okay, you can use the default settings of the software. So on the right-hand side, you can see the power and speed determined. Thickness you could determine as well, but it's not as important. This is more for documentation. When we, as we move to the right-hand side, there is different colors you could activate. So for the Rayjet, the maximum color that you can use is 8 different colors. With the Speedy series, the job control software, you can have up to 16. Okay, so for black, I want it to engrave, and if I have other designs, I can tell it to cut or engrave.
Yeah, can I just add that the colors are not, they don't mean anything aside from the settings that you want to set to the different engraving or cutting speed and power settings of the laser machine. So if you want to have like one light engraving and then a deep engraving and then a cut, then you can make the light engraving black, the deep engraving red, and then the cut can be blue, for example. I mean, we usually deal with red and black, but you can. That's where the options are there for the color. So
Yes,
different types
yes.
of settings in one job, basically.
Mm-hmm. Also, having 8 different colors is good for testing out your settings. So for example, if you have a black that tests for 100 power and 40 speed, you can also have a red that tests for 100 power and like 50 speed, and then you can do so for the other colors. So it's a good way just to run like a test samples for your material or product you're working with. So moving on, you also have air assist. Personally, I like to keep air assist off when I'm engraving, but I always keep air assist on when you're cutting. Okay. Then for the power and speed, you can toggle the power and speed with this little button
Can you
over
explain
here.
what it is?
Oh, sorry, you got cut off.
Sorry, Josephine.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I was saying, can you just explain what the air assist is a little bit to people, because I think many of them have never seen the lasers before, so just kind of what air assist means.
Sure. So what the air assist mean is the air that's flowing downwards from the laser. So this is important for laser cutting, because when you're cutting things like acrylic or wood or any material in general, you don't want a lot of debris collecting. So what the air assist does is, as it cuts the material, the dust or the debris or the off gas of the material is pushed away. So when you're engraving, I like to turn it off because I don't want that dust to engrave in areas that, or fall in areas that I don't want it to be. And I want to turn air assist on when you're cutting because it would reduce flames. What tends to happen is if you cut with air assist off, you see flaming almost instantly. So you want to have that on just to control the quality of cut and the fire. Okay. So moving on to power and speed, you could toggle the buttons to change the settings, or you can input the power and you can input the speed. Right now I have it at 100 power and 40% speed, which is good for engraving on glass. So once I have my settings determined, I click next, and then we're going to move on to the process mode. So for the Rayjet, there are only 2 process mode available. For the job control software, you have more than that. You have, for example, relief mode, layer mode, photo optimize mode, but that's not available for the Rayjet software. For this one, I'm going to stick with standard, but if you're doing or processing stamp, there's also that option for you. Okay.
Yeah, and again, just to kind of mention the, sorry, which modes did you say were not available for the Rayjet Commander?
Photo optimize, which is a useful one for photo engraving. There's the
Right.
relief, which is 3D engraving, layers, and I believe there is.
Yeah, it just gives you guys more options for doing different things, like Josephine mentioned. But you can still do photo engraving with this Rayjet, which is what we'll show you.
Yeah, yeah. So moving on to halftoning, there are 4 options for halftoning. There's ordered dithering, air diffusion, black and white, and color. Most of the time, you'll be using color if your job has, you know, engraving and cuts. But if you're doing a lot of photo engraving, then you use ordered dithering or air diffusion. If you're doing a lot of logo engraving, you use black and white. For this demonstration, I'll be using air diffusion. Okay. The next we're going to move on is the engraving direction. So you can determine if the engraving starts from the bottom up or top down. I'm going to select bottom up. The next is determining the resolution. So you have the option of doing 125 to 1000.
Sorry, Josephine, can you again explain the engraving direction? Why would people want to do bottom up or up down? Like which cases they might have it need for?
Yeah, so whenever you're engraving with acrylics, woods, or plastic, you want to use engraving direction bottom up because you notice when you're engraving with plastics, woods, and acrylics, there's that dust. So when you do bottom up, it cleans that dust a bit. Top down, you could use for engravings like metals or any materials that doesn't have a lot of dust um, to clean up. So that's why I chose to use bottom up for wood.
Yeah, so all these functions that we're showing you guys, I mean, if you were comparing hobby lasers or entry level lasers versus the Rayjet, these are the type of things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing the comparison.
Yeah. So the next option is determining the resolution or the DPI. You have a range that you can play with, but typically you stick with 500 for most materials you're processing. For this demonstration, I find that 333 works best for wood, and I'll show a little sample that I did before just to compare 500 DPI with 300 DPI. 600 and 1000 DPI is mostly good for engraving on anodized metals. Anything lower, like 250 and 125, they're rarely used. This is more for very porous materials. For example, if you're ever engraving on foam or fabrics, you might want to drop it to 250 DPI or 120. But for this example, I'll do 333 for whoops, actually I'm engraving glass, so I'm actually going to leave it at 500 dpi for glass. The next is putting in my rotary attachment. So it asks for a rotary fixture. So I click yes. I measured the diameter of the cup with a digital caliper so I could get an accurate reading. So once that's determined, I'm going to move on to summary. So,
Josephine, just about the DPI. The DPI is dots per inch, and that would reflect I guess, the PPI or the pulse per inch on the laser. So just correct me if I'm wrong. That's the speed and um, the amount of pulse per one single inch.
yeah, yeah. So typically, if you have 500 dpi, that means you have more dots per inch, and that will take longer. Say if you were processing it at lower dpi. So for
Yeah, so
example,
it doesn't necessarily mean quality. It's just more about the material that you're using.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. So you're just hitting the same area more. So
right.
some materials you don't want to hit it as much if it's for example, for wood, there's a lot of grains, and there's tends to be when you burn it, there's a bit of bleed. And when you hit it too much, those small fine details starts to overlap and bleed into each other. That's why we want to reduce the 333 dpi. Other materials like acrylic and different plastic, you can stick with 500 dpi because you still get the fine detail without those dots overlapping each other. This is something that, once you start playing around with the lasers, you figure out like, oh, cool, I can actually drop the resolution and I get a better quality. It's something that you start to play around with and discover.
Perfect.
So going back to summary. So all this page is just a summary of what you've selected. The most important part is at the job start. So if I click software print button and I'm connected to my Rayjet, which I'm not, what happens is once you click this and send the file over, the Rayjet will automatically start. If you want to start based on clicking a button in the software, you want to select Rayjet Start button. If you don't remember what button does what, you could always hover over this icon and it will give you a description of what the button means. Okay, so once I double check, everything looks good. Actually, for my bottle, I wanted to do top down. So I made that change and it looks good. I press play. Okay, so you see at the bottom left corner, the Rayjet Mini Manager will say configuration is sent. I select play. All right, so I'm going to open up my Mini Manager over here. So the Mini Manager is where your job is sent. So I have my file over here. I can delete it if I want. It shows my power settings. Over in the laser tab is where I'm going to move my laser head. So if you don't mind, could you switch over to the Rayjet camera? Perfect. So I'm going to turn on the machine. The switch is at the right side. There it is. Okay. So when you turn it on, you hear the back fan will also turn on, and you see a red dot pointer. When you turn it on, it will initialize by going to the top left corner. I'm just going to move the camera a bit closer so everybody can get a better look. Then the machine will beep at you, which means that the Rayjet is connected. Okay, so over here in the interface, see these arrows over here? This is how I'm going to move my laser head. So I can move it left, I can move it right. So if you open up the Rayjet, what I did already is I moved the arm forward, okay? And what I want to do is align this laser to the middle of the rotary attachment. So to do that, I'm going to move my laser head a bit to the left. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, could you see the red pointer? Is that an okay view? So it might be hard to see, but the red dot pointer is just above this line over here. So I'm going to move the laser head so it's in this line. So I know it's in the midpoint of the rotary tool. So I'm going to move my laser pointer over to the right, over here. So the last thing I want to do is I'm going to take my focus tool. This comes with every machine. This is how you focus the material to the laser head. So I'm going to move this slightly to the back, put it on the ledge, and bring the table upwards. So I want to slowly bring it up until the focus tool tips over, and that's how I know I'm in focus. So once it is in focus, I'm going to move it back to where it is.
Josephine, so just to confirm, so the buttons on the machine themselves move the table up and down, but if you want to move left to right, you got to use the software in that case, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So if anybody has seen the Speedy 100s and up, you actually have a full keypad right on the machine itself. So that's kind of one of the differences between the Rayjet. It's just
Yes.
some differences.
Yeah, and also with the Speedy series, if you have a rotary attachment, the arm will automatically move to the midpoint of the rotary. So that's quite nice. For the Rayjet, it takes, you know, one or two few steps to do. So once I'm in position, I'm gonna close the lid and hop back into my software. All right. So I turn on the exhaust and I'm going to hit play or start.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions at all, just remember you can ask them in the chat, and we'll reply right in real time.
Yeah, you also may notice that I put masking tape. Whenever you're engraving on glass, make sure that you're applying moist newspaper or masking tape. In this case, we're using our transfer tape, which we sell. It's really good for engraving products like glass. If you don't apply that layer, you get this like serrated engraving finish.
And I just put the website engraving-supplies.ca. That's where we sell a lot of our acrylic, lamicoid sheets, materials for the laser, including accessories like the masking tape.
Yeah, so you can see when it's engraving, the rotary is slowly turning it and it's engraving each line. All right.
Is there an actual time on the Rayjet Commander? How long the job will take?
No, so what it does is if in my Rayjet Commander at the bottom over here, it will only tell you that it's 8% finish or 50% finish or 80% finish. So that's how you know your job is, or you get like an idea how long your job would take.
Okay, yeah. So that's another benefit of the Speedy 100. You can see the job time right in the job control software. So again, if you guys haven't seen the job control webinar, I recommend to do so. It's on our YouTube channel, and you'll kind of see the difference in the software between job control and the Rayjet Commander. We have a couple of questions. How fast is the Rayjet compared to the Speedy 100? That's a great question, Richard. So we're actually going to discuss that a little bit later on when we do our comparison. And then we have, do materials come cut to size for the Rayjet? So we have the standard material sheet sizes for our plastic, which is 24 by 48, and then we cut them down to size. Unfortunately, cutting it down to size for the Rayjet will probably be an extra cost in that sense. We do offer that. But usually that's one of the benefits of the Speedy 100. The Speedy 100 comes in the quarter sheet size, which is 12 by 24. So because the Rayjet is smaller, there might be an additional cost depending where you are for cutting it down to size. But the answer is yes. The other question we had was wondering, for the rotary, you have to buy them separately. Yes, the rotary does not come with a laser with the Rayjet. You would have to buy it separately. And we have one more comment from FabLab. Onaki here bought 2 of the laser machines and our Minimap mobile. Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate the support. Thanks, guys. Okay, Josephine, no questions so far. I think I read all of them. You can go ahead.
Cool. So once our bottle is finished, I'm going to unlock the rotary by twisting this, pulling it outwards. And I'm going to use a Mr. Clean eraser or a magic eraser and do a bit of a cleaning. This is actually not just good for your home use, but it's really good for processing lasers. If you have, some some dust on your plastic, or
Yeah, if there's any kind of residue on your plastic sheets, if you use too much power, if there's like a big cutting job, and yeah, Mr. Clean Magic Eraser is actually great. We don't sell those, but those are great to get rid of that.
yeah. So I just wipe it down a bit just to show you the effect.
You want to bring it like really close to the camera so they can see?
If you have a dark background, maybe put it against.
Yeah.
I'll
Is
use
there a
my
dark-
sleeve.
Oh, perfect.
There we go. Another reason why we're all black is for situations like this. You can see it has a nice, almost like a sandblasted finish.
And so how long did it take you? About half a minute or a minute to do?
Yeah, about a minute.
So just picture that if you have, if you're doing a job for like a wedding, and you need 200 glasses with names or personal touches, you can calculate. Okay, one is going to take about a minute.
And mind you, the more that you
It's
do,
usually based on the material. Go ahead, Justina.
I just wanted to add as well that the setup process might seem a little bit longer, but once you have that in place, you have your templates, you have the process, it goes really, really quickly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so now that I'm done with the rotary tool, I'm going to move on to the cutting tool. So if you do purchase a rotary attachment with this machine, when you're taking it out, you want to make sure that you turn off the machine first. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay. Move the laser head out of the way.
Sorry.
There's a plug on the left side. Whoops. Oh, better view? Okay, perfect.
Sorry,
So
Josephine, you just cut off for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you just repeat that again? You got cut off right at the part where you said it's very important when you take the rotary out, and then you got cut off.
Okay, so like I was saying, it's very important when you're taking the rotary attachment out, you want to turn off the machine. So I already did so. The next thing I did was I moved the laser head away so I don't hit it. And the last thing I want to do is just carefully unplug this, like so, and lift it out. And it's pretty lightweight. I'm actually pretty weak, so the fact that I can take it out easily is nice.
You're not that weak.
So I'm going to move on by putting the honeycomb table into the bed. If you're just doing engraving, you don't need this honeycomb table. You could just put the product directly onto the bed. But if you're doing any cutting, you would need a honeycomb table. So I'm going to put that in laser.
And the reason we need this honeycomb table is when the laser machine is cutting, you don't want the light beam to reflect off the steel table and hit the back of your material. So the honeycomb table kind of helps disperse the laser beam when you start the cutting.
Yeah. So same thing. Going to turn on the machine, and it's going to initialize. While that is initializing, I'm going to move on to my next artwork that I'm going to do, which is a photo engraving and cut. So I have a photo prepared.
Sorry, just to quickly interrupt. For photo engraving, again, we have like 2 different webinars and demonstration videos how to optimize a photograph for photo engraving. We're not going to be talking about it in this webinar, but again, if you go to our channel in the training playlist, we have several videos for photo engraving on wood, photo engraving on acrylic. So we do provide a lot of training for that as well. And we just have another question from Richard. Does the honeycomb table come with the Rayjet? Justina, I believe you can answer that.
So our lasers come with a standard cutting table, so it is part of that. But to confirm, you'd have to speak with a sales specialist, and they'd be able to give you the precise information about that.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, so going back to my artwork, what I want to do is position it in the top left corner, because I'm going to put a piece of wood, and I want to cut it in the top left corner. I have my cut line set to Let me ungroup it just to double check that I have the right color value. So I'm going to check RGB 255 red, that's correct, and then hairline, that's correct. So same thing, going to file, print, have my Rayjet engraver selected, preferences, and I'm going to find wood. You could, once again, you could use the default settings or you can create your own and document them. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to be using 30% power, 100% speed for my engraving. And then for my cut, I'm going to use 100 power and 1.2 speed. I am going to be processing our, I believe this is our maple MDF wood. Okay. So once that looks good, I'm going to go to settings, standard. I'm going to be using air diffusion. The only thing I'm going to change is for wood, I'm going to use bottom up engraving direction. And for resolution, I'm going to drop it down to 333 dpi. The last thing I want to do is uncheck the rotary picture and then check cutting table. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to double check my settings. Standard 300 dpi, looks good, and press play. And press print. And then I'm going to open up my mini manager. Okay, you can see I have my old job and then my new job over here. All right. So the last thing I have to do, if you don't mind, switching the camera back to the Rayjet. The last thing I want to do is use my focus tool, put it on the ledge, and bring the bed up. The nice thing about the Speedy series is there's an autofocus function. So there's a sensor that is installed to the laser. You can just press 2 buttons and you can see the bed rise up and adjust it according to the material you pick, the material you process.
Guys, there's also a really good video for James in the van that we did, actually comparing the Rayjet to the Speedy 100, and he covers a lot of more detailed differences between the two. Again, it's on our YouTube channel. I know I'm plugging this, but it's a really good video if you want to kind of see the main differences between the Rayjet and the Speedy 100.
Okay, so I have my job and same thing. Press play. And you can see it engraved. Okay.
Yeah, so photo engraving on wood and photo engraving on acrylic. A lot of engravers also do photo engraving on anodized aluminum. Anodized aluminum works really well for photo engraving. The dots per inch, I guess they're just, it's not actually engraving deep on the anodized aluminum. It's just kind of taking off the paint a little bit. So if you're doing any kind of family portraits or, again, any kind of promotional pieces for anything from restaurants to clubs and associations, that sort of thing, it's a great kind of selling tool for that.
Okay. You can kind of see on my screen that the Rayjet Mini Manager always pops up saying, telling you it's 51% done, it's 55% done. So that's how you can tell.
So there is some progress.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, guys, if you just tuned in, we are going to cover kind of the differences right after this demo between the Hobby Laser, Rayjet, and the Speedy 100.
Mm-hmm. So I've done a lot of, photo engravings on the Rayjet and the Speedy. I was really surprised with the photo quality engraving with the Rayjet. I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's almost like very similar to the Speedy model.
Yeah, and that was actually a really quick cut. How big is the size of that? What is that, a 2x2?
Yes, um, a 2x2. I think it was a bit too quick.
Oh, you might want to do an extra pass maybe?
Yeah, I think I put it a bit too quick. So
Well, this is a good example. So right now you're just going to do the cutting and not engraving.
exactly. Let me double check. 100% power. Speed.
Yeah, so she skipped the black. If you guys saw that, there's an option to skip
Yeah.
right there. So she skipped the black, and then the red, she set the power settings. Usually, if you don't take the material out of the laser and just keep it in, it's going to be perfectly fine to cut or engrave over a second time. As soon as you move it a little bit, even a tiny fraction, it's not going to be aligned. Oh, sorry. Did that cut already?
Oh. Oh, yeah, I think it went a bit too fast.
A bit too fast. Okay, so yeah, it's always going to be. We're always going to put the material at the top left-hand corner. So, like you saw, Josephine kind of just tilt it up a little bit. That's not going to make any difference, especially if we're just doing a simple square. But again, as soon as you move it, here we have a comment as well. Just was gonna say, I saw the speed of that kind of look super fast and a bit too fast. Yeah, I mean that would have been good for maybe a paper cut, but yeah, for wood, especially, I think it's just about 3. No, it's under. I think it's 3 mil, 1.5,
Yeah.
1/8 inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to cut it a bit slower.
You could cut thicker materials, but you probably need multiple passes.
And I
Yeah,
know
if you
this
guys-
is, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I know this is another shout to our YouTube channel, but if you want to figure out how to get the best settings, we actually have a video starring Josephine on, it's about a 30-minute video on how you can create your own swatches. So then that takes a lot of the guesswork out of the process.
Yeah, exactly. It's called material settings video. But just so you guys know, in job control, you actually have a lot of the settings already in the job database. And the video is really, if you're not satisfied with those materials, it's how to find your own material settings. So if you go on our YouTube channel, just type material settings Trotec, and then you'll find that video. So Josephine, how are we doing?
Cool. So I just popped it out. You can see the difference between 303 DPI and
Sorry,
500.
just a bit closer to the camera, just for people to a little bit to the left. Yeah,
there we
right
go.
there. There we go.
So the first test I did was 500 DPI. You can see that a lot of those fine details disappear because the spot size bleed into each other. So what I did was I reduced it to 333 dpi. You can get more of his facial features, and you can kind of find where his eyes are and his eyebrows are. So you could play around with the DPIs just to get different qualities, and that's a pretty awesome feature with the Rayjet. Okay.
Yeah, and that specific photo of the weekend was actually done on a huge cork canvas board. It wasn't meant to be optimized for this kind of small 2x2 inch wood. So again, I recommend to watch our photo engraving on wood video, and you guys will see like how Mike really showed the contrast well. The photo he did turned out exceptionally well. This is good, but again, this is blown up quite a bit. So, but at least we can see the difference in the DPI there. So that's perfect.
Yeah. Great.
Awesome. Anything to add, Josephine?
Nope, not for me.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just gonna go through. I guess we'll just have a quick comparison about the hobby lasers or entry level lasers on the markets. The Rayjets, which is I guess the entry level industrial laser for Trotec, and then the Speedy 100, which is really the starting industrial laser for the production machine. So anybody who runs a business or is planning to run a business with laser engraving, if it's not just a hobby, if you're not just doing the one-offs, you want a machine that's obviously powerful and lasts long. And anyways, we'll go through all the details. So Justina, if you want to kind of go through each point and we can have a discussion. And again, guys, chime in, ask questions, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, of course. And I just wanted to take pause and ask if anyone has any questions about what Josephine went over. Please let us know in the comment section. So the next part of this webinar is going to be a little bit, I don't want to say information heavy, but there's going to be some more details that, that might not be really familiar. So do let us know if, you have any questions, but we'll kind of keep it at a base level. So the purpose of this is really to give you more information about what to look for in a laser, essentially, because there are so many different characteristics and you can delve so deeply into things that, it can spin your head crazy if you've done it. So I just wanted to lay out a couple of points just to definitely keep in mind when you're looking at, more hobby class lasers and then production grade lasers, for example, such as the ones that we offer. So the first thing I'll talk about is the laser tube. So the laser tube is actually, you can think of it as the heart of the laser. It's fundamental to actually generating a laser beam. Because what you do, this is actually how a laser beam is generated, is you pump energy into this. And then inside there, actually, this specific tube, there's a carbon dioxide gas mixture. And what that does is it amplifies that energy and essentially generates the laser beam, if you imagine. It comes out the other end. So why this is really, really important is that these tubes are made out of different materials. The one that I'm holding right now is glass. So this one, it has some disadvantages, and these are typically found in the hobbyist / entry-level machines. So the issues arise when it comes to speed. So due to the physics of how a laser beam comes to be, when you have a glass tube, the laser process is actually a lot slower. So the Rayjet has a metal tube, which I'll speak to in a little bit, but with a glass tube, it's significantly slower. Also,
Justina, sorry to interrupt. We do have a comment. Oh, sorry, a question. How thick of a material can you cut with the Rayjet? Had issues with anything bigger than 8 millimeters, or is that all related to the settings of the profile? And Justina, you can add to this, but the Rayjet, cutting 8 millimeters is already very thick for a Rayjet. The 100 usually, if you do multiple passes, if you have enough wattage, you can cut 8 millimeters. If you're looking to do a one cut pass, you need something like a 80 watt or 100 watt or 120 watt, speedies. I think correct me if I'm wrong, Justina, what's the highest wattage the 100 comes in?
It can go up to 60 watts. And just
60 watts. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. Just to add on, and this is a very general rule of thumb, we recommend 10 watts for every millimeter of material you want to cut. And again, that's super general because if any of you have done woodworking, you'll know that there are so many different types of wood with different densities. So generally speaking, the Rayjet can cut up to 3 millimeters and sometimes 4 millimeters. But that's, again, general rule, and you always want to test.
Yeah. So, in terms of production value, if you're looking to produce lots and lots of pieces of acrylic or wood, obviously the more power you have, the better. We always say customers never complain that they have too much power, but they do complain that, oh, I wish I got more power, because they can't have those kind of production runs. But no, that's a great question. Sorry, Justina. Yeah, go ahead with the tubes.
Yeah, no worries. Where I just wanted to, start off where I left off was the material of the tube, due to the physics again of how a laser beam is generated, will have an impact on the speed. But also, it'll have an impact on what we call or refer to as beam quality. So the perfect laser beam is what's really interesting. Actually, is a laser beam isn't kind of like what you see in a cartoon where it's just a straight column. It actually resembles an hourglass. So where your laser is quote unquote in focus, and how small you want it to be, where it's engraving, is actually at the center of that hourglass, if you can picture that. So the ideal laser beam, it's really, really narrow and it's circular. So it's an actual dot. But what happens with these glass tubes sometimes is due to, again, the science behind it. You get a little bit of a distorted beam, and it doesn't really cause that many issues, quote unquote, when you're cutting, but when you're engraving. So for example, the image that Josephine did, you would definitely notice a difference if you were just doing standard engraving with a glass tube and another tube. So one thing, and this is kind of, beyond the scope of this webinar, but if you want to look into it, it's DC, so direct current, versus RF, radio frequency tubes. So that's just, a little extra, but that's, again, going to the next level. So the Rayjet that Josephine just presented has a metal resonator. So it looks like this. This has the carbon dioxide gas mixture in there too. But what it enables you to do is engrave a lot faster and get better quality. So that's for the Rayjet. And then just for comparison, the Speedy 100 in the 30 watt configuration, it has a metal tube. So it has the same as that resonator tube, mean the same thing. And the ceramic is for the Speedy 100 and upwards. So you're looking at 50 watts, 60 watts and higher. Okay, and then the next piece that I wanted to speak about was the speed. So as I mentioned, the composition of the tube will ultimately have an impact on how fast your laser goes. And this was a question I believe someone asked earlier on. So it's hard kind of to picture, what the figures and facts all mean. But if you see the difference, that's the best way to really understand it. So the Rayjet was going at about at a max speed, it's about 60 inches per second. But the maximum speed on your standard, and again, this is us grouping them, but generally speaking, on a hobbyist entry level laser is around 30 to 40, and that's the 40s at the high end. So if you imagine about 2/3 or half of the speed of the Rayjet is what you would achieve with a standard, average hobby entry-level laser. So you'd notice that there's a significant impediment there, especially anyone who has been an entrepreneur before will know that clients put in last-minute orders. So it can be difficult to achieve those if your laser can't go fast enough, and especially if it can't keep up producing consistent quality results, because then the last thing that you want is to produce a lot of duds, right?
Sorry, Justina, just to quickly go back to the laser tubes. I don't think we mentioned about how long they last.
Yes.
The glass, metal, and ceramic tubes. If you can give us a breakdown in maybe, I know that they're generally measured in hours, but a rough average of in a year or yearly average, how much do these tubes last?
Sure. So it really does vary, as Lev mentioned, by the time that they're actually in operation. And actually, interestingly enough, when the glass ones are just sitting there idle in your machine, they're losing their service life, or their service life's being shortened. So with your standard glass tube, you're looking at around 7 months to a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And again, we're speaking really generally. And then those have to be replaced. And there's no manufacturers in Canada of those, so they have to be imported from overseas. So that, is an added consideration that, on top of the actual cost of the piece, you have to pay the duties. The Rayjet, so the metal one, that one lasts about 4 to 6 years. And we actually replace tubes here from our service centers across Canada, so you don't have to worry about, finding it online or chasing it down from another vendor.
And just to add, we have 4 service centers or showrooms across Canada: Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Calgary.
Yes. And lastly, the ceramic tube, that one's around 8 to 12 years. So that'll get you some pretty good mileage there.
So yeah, so the reason I kind of brought this up is, when people are trying to buy their first laser, obviously price is very, very important. It's a new business, a big investment in, but it's really a question of not just quality of the machines, but the speed as well. How many jobs would you be able to run in 6 months or in a year once you have some kind of a client base? And on top of that, the tubes themselves. So how long are the tubes going to last you? Like, do you need to have extra glass tubes to replace them every now and again? Is that something that you want to do? In terms of the only other consumables for the laser is really the lenses. And if you keep them clean, and again, we have videos to show you how to clean them. It takes a few minutes. If you keep the lenses and mirrors clean, there should be no consumables issues in terms of what you have to replace. Yeah, sorry, Justina, we can keep going with the cooling system.
Okay, so the next piece that we're going to refer to is how your laser is cooled. So remember that tube, as it's generating that energy, as that heart is beating, so to speak, it's generating heat. And just like any other piece of equipment, any other machine, it's subject to overheating. So in the case of the Rayjet, Josephine, if you could show where the fan is at the back of the machine with the camera, please. That heat is actually extracted through a fan at the back of the machine. And you don't have to worry about doing anything else. Essentially, the machine just runs itself, or the exhaust, the fan removes the heat itself. And then if you're using a Speedy 100, it's the exact same scenario where where the fan is at the back of the machine. And with the standard hobby grade machine, what's happening is you have a tank at the bottom that you have to keep refilling with water. So it's a convenience factor too. And sometimes there's a special coolant, but in that case, it can become a real problem if you don't fill it up, if it's completely empty. And then you can actually damage your machine. So in the case of a lot of hobbyists or entry-level lasers, that's the case, that you have to just keep refilling that. So it's a convenience factor. And okay, great. So any questions at this point, guys? Are you all right?
No, nothing so far.
Okay, all right, great. So the next point that we'll cover briefly is the software. So the software isn't the design software that we're referring to, but the software to actually operate the laser to adjust those power levels. So like the Rayjet Commander that Josephine used. So with the entry-level or hobbyist machines, there's a whole plethora of software out there, and it has, depending on the vendor, it can have severely limited functionality, or to get advanced functionality, you actually have to take a lot of extra steps, which may actually include replacing some hardware in your machine. So you're actually getting into kind of like an engineering role to actually get your laser to operate at a base convenient level. So you saw the Rayjet Commander for the Rayjet. It's a really simple interface. It can still do complex designs. So like, for example, that image that Josephine did, but the functionality is, while still robust, it's not as strong as what you'd find on job control. So if you take a look at the webinar, you don't even have to, perhaps if you have time, you can watch the full thing, but just if you flip through it, you can see all the different, functions. So, if you can achieve so many different results with using job control. And the last point that we'll just cover up just in this kind of a quick rundown or quick comparison is the payment. So as we are located in Canada, so we have various Canadian branches, we all of our machines and financing plans, they're offered in Canadian dollars. So sometimes when you're looking online, a lot of times what you'll find is in US dollars, and that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're paying in Canadian, because the exchange rate might not be in your favor. Or if, there's financing plans and there's a set exchange rate, if they're charging you in US dollars, then it can, obviously the costs go up there.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, just a quick thing about the software. I don't know if you guys ever used different kinds of software. I mean, I've had experience with CNC machines and UV printers and other laser machines. Having a decent software that's easy to use is so important, especially once you kind of get started, especially in the beginning stages too, when you're kind of learning, having that kind of learning curve. I really recommend checking out the Job Control webinar. See for yourself. It's actually it's one of the most user-friendly software. Obviously, I'm biased towards it, but objectively, from my objective opinion, it's one of the easier software to learn and move around. I mean, you saw the Rayjet Commander. It's very, very kind of light and easy to use, but there's so much more functionality with Job Control, which is why we always recommend the Speedy series over the Rayjet. Is you just get so much more. Yes, they're more expensive, not a whole lot more, but you definitely, if you want to use production equipment, production lasers for your growing business or your new business, I would strongly recommend to at least look at the Speedy 100, not just the Rayjet. So, we do web demos across Canada. So if you want a one-on-one kind of demo with the laser, if you're looking at, let's say, the Speedy 300, we can set up a demo just like this, where we can talk to you guys in real time. You can ask questions in real time. Or if you're close to one of our facilities in Canada, like I mentioned, just pop by or give us a call. I'm actually going to put down our contact information again. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Again, I'll post this video up today on YouTube if you want to kind of go back and revisit what we talked about. I just wanted to thank Justina and Josephine for doing such an amazing job. And again, thank you, Miguel, for doing the camera work there. We really appreciate it. We hope to have more webinars for you guys in the future. And stay tuned and be part of this community, this Trotec community in Canada.
Yeah, thanks,
okay.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one. Take care.